Wyoming Territory, July 1883. The dry wind kicked up dust along the platform in Casper as the train hissed to a stop, and every head turned toward the last car as a woman in a pale blue traveling dress stepped down, her wide-brimmed hat low over her face. Hope Delaney kept her eyes on the ground, heart pounding, hands clutching her carpetbag like it was the only thing holding her together. She could feel it already, the shift in the air, the way people quieted and stared. It always came after the first look. She turned slightly, and a child gasped. A woman whispered behind her gloved hand. Hope kept walking. The right half of her face bore the scars of the house fire that had taken her parents when she was 17. Her skin, once smooth and even, was now a patchwork of burn scars, stretched and faded over time but still enough to make strangers recoil. She had lived with the stairs for 8 years, but it never stopped hurting. She walked past the small crowd and scanned the wagons parked nearby. A man in a brown had held up a sign that read, "Hope Delaney." He was not the man she was meant to marry. The letters she had received over the last 4 months were from a widower named Charles Hargreaves, a rancher in need of a wife to help raise his 2 young children. She had agreed, knowing it was her last chance at anything like a life. Her options had narrowed to that mail-order bride to a man she had never met. But the man holding the sign was younger, late 20s, maybe 30, broad-shouldered, sun-browned, with a quiet steadiness in the way he stood. His eyes were a pale green that caught the sun just right when he spotted her. "You are not Charles," she said softly, stopping a few feet away. "No, ma'am," he said. "My name's Thatcher Ames. Charles was my brother-in-law. He passed 4 weeks ago. Snakebite." Hope froze. He died." "Yes, ma'am." Thatcher looked down for a moment. "He and my sister, Clara, both. Fever took her a few days later. I came to fetch you because of the children. They got no one else." Hope's breath caught. Her fingers tightened around the bag. "I know this is not what you expected," he added, "but they were counting on someone coming." "How old?" she asked. 6 and 4. "Their names are Levi and Lucy." Hope's heart twisted. "Orphans, like she once was. They think I am their new mother? They do not understand much yet. Just that someone's coming to take care of them." She hesitated, but only for a moment. They had no one, and she could not turn away. "All right." Thatcher nodded, and something like relief passed through his eyes. The ride back to the ranch was quiet. They passed golden fields and pine-thick hills, the sky so wide it made her feel small. She did not speak unless he asked a direct question, and even then she kept her answers clipped. But she noticed things about him: how he slowed the wagon when the road turned rough, how he kept glancing her way, not with pity or discomfort, but something else she could not name. They arrived just before sunset. The house was small but clean, with smoke curling from the chimney. Levi and Lucy came running out barefoot, their shirts stained with berry juice. "Uncle Thatcher!" Lucy cried, throwing herself at his leg. Levi hung back, eyeing Hope shyly. Thatcher lifted Lucy easily. "This is Miss Hope. She's come to stay with us." Lucy looked up at her, wide-eyed. "You are pretty," she said. Hope blinked hard. Something caught in her throat. "That is very kind," she whispered. That night, after the children were in bed, Hope stood at the porch rail. The sky was painted in deep oranges and purples, and the air smelled of pine and smoke. She heard the screen door creak behind her. "Hope," Thatcher said quietly, "about today. I am sorry for the way things changed." She turned to him. "You did not owe me anything. You came to fetch me. That alone." He stepped closer. "I saw the way folks looked at you in town. I know what it means to be judged for something you cannot change." She met his eyes. "And yet you did not look away." "I never would." She swallowed. "Why?" "Because I saw you," he said simply. "Not just your face. You walked into a town where you knew no one and still stood straight. You came here knowing the man you were to marry had died and still stepped off that wagon. That takes guts." Hope could not speak. Her throat burned. I will not ask anything from you. You do not owe me or those children anything, he said. But you are welcome here. As long as you want to stay. She nodded. I will stay. He gave a small smile. Then we will make this work. Together. That night, as she lay in the small bedroom off the hall, Hope let herself cry for the grief, for the weight of everything she had lost, and for the strange, quiet way this cowboy had looked at her and seen something worth staying for. The rooster called just before first light. Hope was already up, sitting on the edge of the narrow bed, unlacing the boots she'd worn on the journey. Her fingers moved slowly. The burns had tightened the skin along her knuckles on one hand, and the chill in the room made it worse. She heard soft footsteps in the hall, followed by the scrape of wood on wood. When she stepped out, Thatcher was already in the kitchen, piling kindling into the stove. He didn't see her at first. I can take over, she said. He looked up, brushing his hands on his trousers. Fire's almost set. You any good with sourdough? I can manage, she replied, moving past him to fetch the crock. The counter was worn smooth from years of use. She liked that. Thatcher didn't linger. He set his hat on the hook by the door. I'll be in the north pasture. Levi likes to sit by the coop and watch the hens. If Lucy doesn't wake, he'll be all right a little while. Hope nodded. She didn't ask what needed doing in the pasture. If he wanted her to know, he'd say. The children came in not long after he left. Levi carried a stick taller than himself and Lucy held a rag doll by one foot. They stood in the doorway uncertainly until Hope offered them a piece of cornbread and warm milk. They sat on the floor and ate in silence, watching her with careful eyes. After breakfast, she led them outside. The air was crisp, with the scent of morning dew still clinging to the grass. She showed Lucy how to braid wildflowers into a chain, and Levi, quiet but watchful, followed the cat around the yard like it was a mystery he meant to solve. Late in the morning, she scrubbed the table while the children napped. The rhythm of it soothed her, cloth sweeping wood, the scent of lye soap rising in the warmth. She didn't hear Thatcher return until the door eased open. He set a bucket of eggs on the counter and leaned against the frame. You all right? I kept them busy. I can see that. He glanced toward the bedroom. Lucy hasn't let anyone braid her hair since Clara. Hope folded the cloth. She asked me to. He nodded once. I'm glad. She didn't know what to say to that, so she said nothing. He didn't seem to mind. He reached for the eggs and began sorting them into a crate. Are you planning to stay through the winter? He asked after a moment. Yes. Then we'll need to build another room on the back side. You'll be crowded otherwise. I don't mind close quarters. He turned his head, studied her for a long second. Still, the next few days settled into quiet patterns. She mended shirts and taught Lucy to stitch straight lines into scraps of muslin. Levi followed Thatcher around the barn, asking questions in a voice just above a whisper. Hope listened while she shelled peas, the boy's voice rising, Thatcher's replies low and patient. That afternoon, Hope walked to the edge of the vegetable patch with a tin pail. The beans were ready for picking. She crouched in the dirt, skirt hitched just enough to keep clean, and worked steadily, sun warming her back. You missed one. She looked up. Thatcher stood nearby, holding out a green pod she'd overlooked. He wore a shirt with the sleeves rolled, forearms streaked with dust. She took the bean from his hand. I suppose I did. He crouched beside her, resting his arms on his knees. I've been thinking about what comes next. Tell me. The children need more than chores and quiet. Levi doesn't speak much to anyone but me. But he listens to you. And Lucy, she's already following your lead. You've been here less than a week, and they're different. Hope didn't know how to respond. Her throat worked around the words before she found any. I didn't come here expecting to be needed, she said. Just to get by. You're not just getting by. She looked at him. His face was steady as ever, but there was something behind his eyes now. A kind of steadiness turned toward her, not just the house. Why are you telling me this? Because I built this place for folks I lost. And now it's yours too, if you want it to be. She blinked, not from the sun. Then she nodded, just once, and turned back to the beans. He stayed beside her the rest of the way through the row, neither of them speaking. That evening, she sat in the rocker on the porch while Lucy slept curled in her lap. Levi leaned against Thatcher's side on the steps below. The sun dipped behind the hills, casting long shadows across the yard. Hope brushed a strand of hair from Lucy's cheek and looked over at Thatcher. His gaze met hers, quiet and certain. Neither of them smiled. But something passed between them all the same. Something that didn't need to be named yet, but was already taking root. The first frost came early that year, silvering the grass one morning in late September. Hope woke to the brittle hush of it, the windows edged in delicate patterns like pressed lace. She dressed quietly, pulling her shawl tight, and stepped outside to fetch kindling before the children stirred. Thatcher was already in the yard, sleeves buttoned down, driving fence posts into the far edge of the pasture. His breath fogged in the cold, hammer swinging in clean arcs. She watched him a moment before turning toward the woodshed, the ground stiff beneath her boots. Inside, she stacked split logs in her arms, pausing when she heard the latch click behind her. "You always up this early?" Thatcher asked, stepping inside with a lantern in hand. She looked over her shoulder. "Habit. The mornings were the only time I could be alone back in the home I stayed in after my parents passed. I suppose it stayed with me." He set the lantern on a beam and leaned against the wall. "I wouldn't mind if you taught Levi to rise early. He's got it in him, just doesn't know it yet." "I'll see what I can do," she said, brushing a wisp of hair behind her ear. Then, after a beat, "You don't ask many questions. I figure when folks are ready to tell something, they will." She turned to face him fully. "Would you mind if I asked you one?" His jaw eased. "Go ahead. Why haven't you married before now?" He tilted his head slightly as if considering the shape of the question. "I helped Clara raise Levi when Charles was away working claims. After she wed, I stayed close by just in case. Never found a reason to leave, and I reckon I never found someone worth starting something with." Hope nodded, absorbing that. "So you gave up your own life to guard hers." "She was my sister," he said. "Didn't feel like giving anything up." She studied him in the quiet that followed. "You're not what I expected." "What did you expect?" She hesitated. "A man who'd tolerate me because he pitied me. Not someone who noticed what I did for children or what time I rise to fetch wood." He stepped closer, the lantern casting a soft glow on the rough planes of his face. "I see you, Hope. Every day." Her breath caught, but she didn't look away. Then the sound of Lucy's laugh carried from the house, followed by the creak of the porch boards. Hope turned toward it. "They're up." He didn't stop her as she moved past him, but she felt his gaze on her all the way to the door. That afternoon, while Lucy napped and Levi practiced carving letters with a piece of charcoal on the porch rail, Hope returned to the cupboard and pulled out a length of muslin sheet tucked away. She'd been saving it for something quiet and purposeful. Thatcher entered just before dusk, his coat dusted from riding out to check the creek crossings. He set his gloves on the table and looked at the cloth in her lap. "You sewing something for Lucy?" She shook her head. "For you. You haven't a proper handkerchief without holes." He gave a small huff of surprise. "I didn't think you noticed." "I notice everything," she said. "You don't think I saw the way you lifted Lucy from the wagon last week? Careful as if she were made of glass? Or how you keep Levi's carving knife just sharp enough to teach him, but not to cut too deep?" He stepped closer, voice quiet. "I don't know what to say to that." "You don't have to say anything," she replied, eyes fixed on her sewing. "But I wanted you to know I see you too." The lantern flickered between them and he reached for the chair across from her, lowering himself slowly. "Mama used to say the best kind of love came quiet," he said. "The kind you build without noticing until one day you look up and it's the only thing holding the roof on." Hope's hands stilled. "Do you think we're building something?" "I think we already are," he said. The wind picked up outside, brushing against the eaves. Levi shifted in his sleep near the hearth, and Lucy sighed softly in the next room. Hope looked down at the fabric in her lap. Then she met his gaze. "I'd like to keep building if you'll have me." He didn't smile, didn't reach for her hand. Just nodded once, slow and sure. "We're already halfway there," he said. And in the quiet that followed, something settled between them, closer than words, steadier than hope. Promise not made but understood. The first snow came sudden and wet, melting into the porch boards before the light even cleared the treetops. Hope stood in the doorway with Levi clinging to her side, his small fingers curled into the folds of her apron. He watched the flakes drift down with a quiet awe, chin tipped upward, mouth slightly open. "It won't stay long," she said, brushing the top of his head. "The early ones never do." Behind them, the soft scrape of boots on floorboards drew her attention. Thatcher entered from the back room, a folded piece of paper in one hand and a wool coat slung over his shoulder. "I need to ride into town," he said. "A wire came in. There's a man in Cheyenne claims he knew Charles from the mining camps. Wants to talk about some debt owed." Hope raised an eyebrow. "Does it seem real?" Thatcher gave a short shake of his head. "Not sure yet. Could be a grifter chasing ghosts." "Will you be gone long?" "Back before dusk if the horse holds steady." She nodded, but something in her chest tightened anyway. She didn't ask him not to go, she never had, but there was a cold edge under her ribs that hadn't been there before. He crouched to speak to Levi. "Keep an eye on your sister. And if your mama says it's too cold to go barefoot, then it is." Levi nodded solemnly, then glanced up at Hope, uncertainty flickering in his eyes. "Mama," he echoed softly. Her breath caught. Thatcher looked at her, eyes steady, waiting to see what she'd say. She bent slowly, resting her hand on the boy's shoulder. "You can call me that if you want to." Levi didn't answer, but he leaned into her side just a little, and that was enough. Thatcher straightened, gave her one last look, then stepped out into the snow. The day passed slow and gray. Lucy helped Hope peel apples while Levi ran errands between the barn and the house, fetching small things and reporting back with careful pride. By mid-afternoon, the clouds thickened and the wind shifted, whistling low under the eaves. Hope glanced at the sky, then at the road, heart ticking louder with each hour that passed. By the time the lanterns were lit and Lucy was curled against her side beneath the quilt, the sound of hooves in the yard made her heart stutter. Thatcher pushed the door open, coat stiff with sleet, cheeks raw from wind. He shut it behind him and looked across the room at her. "You're late," she said softly. He peeled off his gloves, setting them by the stove. "Horse threw a shoe crossing the creek. Had to walk the last stretch." She rose, guiding Lucy toward the bedroom. "I'll get you warm water." He caught her wrist gently. "Is there coffee left?" She met his eyes. They were rimmed with exhaustion, but clear. "I'll pour you some." While he sat at the table, she filled a mug and set it before him, her fingers brushing the rim without thinking. "The man in Cheyenne?" she asked. "Didn't show. Station master said he left yesterday morning. Never left a name." She sat across from him, folding her hands in her lap. "You think he was after something?" "Maybe. Or maybe he just wanted a place to send his bitterness." The fire cracked softly between them. Hope studied his face, the small lines around his mouth, the way his hands curled loosely around the mug. "I used to think I'd live out my days hidden away," she said. "Not because I wanted to, just because it seemed easier than waiting for someone to look past what I'd become." "You were never hidden here," he said. "I don't feel hidden," she admitted. Then, after a moment, "But I do feel seen, and I'm not sure I know what to do with that yet." "You don't have to know. You just have to stay." She reached for his hand, not with hesitation, but with care. His fingers met hers, rough and warm, and she didn't let go. Outside, the snow continued to fall, gentler now, the world softening beneath its hush. Inside, the silence was full, not empty, not broken, just full enough to hold them both. By mid-November, the wind off the mountains carried a steady bite, and the mornings came with a hush that spoke of deeper cold coming soon. In the barn, the scent of hay and horse mixed with the quiet clatter of tools as Thatcher bent over the yoke harness, mending a worn leather strap. Hope stood nearby, her apron dusted with flour from the morning's baking, holding a tin of liniment she'd made from bear fat and pine resin. "You've let this crack too long," she said, handing him the salve. "I was hoping it'd last the season." "You knew better." He gave a single nod and rubbed the mixture into the leather with slow, practiced movements. She watched the way his hands moved, steady and sure, not rushed but not idle either. There was comfort in the way he worked, like the world might still be mended with enough care. "I've been thinking," she said, brushing a stray curl behind her ear. "Levi's ready for letters. He's slow to speak, but his mind's sharp. If we could get a primer from town, I could start with him before the new year." Thatcher didn't look up. "He'll like that. He watches how you handle the books, like he wants to ask questions but doesn't know how. I think he's waiting to be invited. He's not the only one." She went still, then met his gaze. "You mean me?" "I mean, we've been walking side by side for months now. You've taken care of this house, these children, and you've let me learn you slow. I've wanted to ask something. Just didn't want to ask before you were ready." She took a step closer, boots crunching lightly on the straw-covered floor. "Ask." He set the harness aside and stood, wiping his hands on a cloth. "Would you stay here? Not just through winter. Not just for the children. But with me. As my wife." Hope's breath trembled out. "I've stayed this long because I can't picture being anywhere else. And because I love you." He reached for her hand, fingers curling around hers. "Then marry me. Before the snow sets deep. Let's do this right." She nodded, voice barely above a whisper. "Yes." They were married 2 weeks later in the parlor of the house, with the children holding wild branches for decoration and the preacher from the next ridge road reading from his worn Bible. Lucy wore a ribbon in her hair, and Levi stood close to Thatcher's side with his shoulders squared like a young man who understood the weight of things. Hope wore a dress she'd sewn from a length of wool she'd found in Clara's trunk, dyed a warm russet with crushed walnut and iron. She stitched the hem late at night by lamplight after the house had gone still. After the preacher left and the children were asleep, Thatcher took her hand and led her to the porch where the moon lit the yard in soft silver. "I never thought I'd find this," he said, his voice low. "Not after losing Clara. Not after watching so much fall apart." "I didn't think it was meant for me," she replied. "But I was wrong." He rested his hand on her cheek, the side where the burn scars curved across her temple and down to her jaw. She didn't flinch. "Not anymore. You're the strongest person I've ever known," he said. "You came from fire and still built something beautiful." Her eyes filled, but the tears didn't fall. She leaned into his touch and whispered, "You gave me room to stay whole." He kissed her then, slow and sure, the kind of kiss that didn't ask for anything but gave everything in return. The wind stirred around them, but the cold didn't touch her. That winter, they moved through the days like a team, long yoked, quiet, steady, certain. Hope taught Levi his letters by the hearth, while Lucy learned to sew stitches tight enough to hold a hem. Thatcher worked the livestock and mended fences, and every evening, without fail, he came through the door and found Hope's eyes first. By spring, the land softened again, and the apple saplings bloomed behind the barn. Hope planted herbs near the porch and began teaching Lucy how to tend them. Levi read aloud each night, slow but certain, and the pride in his voice made Hope's chest ache in the best way. One morning, Thatcher came in from the barn early, brushing straw from his sleeves. He found her at the stove, stirring cornmeal into boiling milk. "You're humming," he said. She looked up, smile tugging at her mouth. "Didn't notice. You only hum when you're content." She turned, hands stilling. "I am." He stepped behind her, arms circling her waist, resting his chin on her shoulder. "We've built something, haven't we?" "We have. It's good. It's more than good," she said. "It's ours." By the time the first calf was born in late May, the land had bloomed fully. Levi ran through the fields with Lucy close behind, their laughter rising high above the fence lines. Hope stood with Thatcher by the barn, her hand resting on his chest, his arm around her shoulders. And when she looked out across the land, sunlight warming her face, she knew she'd found something not even fire could take. A home. A family. A man who saw her and never once looked away. They stood quiet, side by side, as the wind moved through the tall grass, and the world carried on around them gentle, certain, whole.